Good morning. My name is Rich Suval. I'm from the Worship Committee. Our opening words today are by Reverend Lee Kinvey. I know some of you are familiar with her. It's called A True Story. This chalice is for the living, the changing, the becoming. This chalice is for losing the script of your life. The chapter is about who you are in other people's stories. This chalice is for the lost GPS that was supposed to show you how to get where they expected you to go. This chalice is for skipping the directions, coloring outside the lines, painting not by number, but by silence, by wild abandon, with a brush you made yourself from the light deep inside. Startling and vivid, a new voice that already knows you. Finally, a true story. Our opening hymn is number 347, Gather the Spirit. It will be in your gray or cloth-bound hymnal. Please rise in body or spirit as you're able.
Good morning. And welcome to First Parish in Bedford, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we come together as a people with diverse beliefs and a shared commitment to bring more peace, more love, more justice, and more joy into this world. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whether you worship one God, many gods, or no God, you are welcome here. And welcome to the first Sunday of the Summer Consortium. I apologize for underestimating for the second summer in a row how many orders of worship we would need. Who is here from Waltham? Just give a little wave. Woo, Waltham in the house. How about Concord? Who's here from Concord? Oh yeah, Concord, represent. All right, what about Lincoln? Oh, we got a Lincoln crowd. Lexington? Okay, Lexington. How about Bedford? Woo, all right. We have got a great crew here this morning. And if you are visiting here and are not from any of those congregations and are just checking us out, a special welcome to you, including if you're here on Zoom. If you are a new visitor who's looking to get more involved here, you can fill out a blue connection card, which you'll find at the end of your pew, or you can look for a link on Zoom. And if you have a little one with you, please know that little ones are welcome in the service, and there is also a nursery that is staffed downstairs that you can also use, and where you can leave your little one if you're so inclined. After the service, you're welcome to join us for coffee and tea in our fellowship hall that is just across that way. You can also, at that time, stop by the environmental justice table for Stop Private Jet Expansion yard signs, flyers, or to sign a petition. And you can call the governor even. Someone is calling. Private jets are a very highly polluting form of travel per person. Their carbon footprint is overwhelming, and it's an environmental injustice to allow it to continue, so that's why folks are working to stop it. And the other announcement is that next Sunday, this consortium service will be at First Parish in Waltham, so head on over to Waltham next Sunday. Yeah, people are excited about that. I love that. I love Waltham. And so with that, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit to join in our unison affirmation that I think is printed. Yes, it's on this page. I never have to look for it because I know it, but it's right here on the inside flap. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en espíritu de amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. You may be seated. And thank you for joining in. We say it in Spanish as a holdover from years ago when we had a sanctuary guest who spoke Spanish, and we still do it. I think it's a good practice. All right.
This is a Buddhist prayer of compassion. It's called On This Day. On this day, mend a quarrel, search out a forgotten friend, write a love letter, share some treasures, give a soft answer. Manifest your loyalty in a word or deed. Keep a promise. Find the time. Forgive an enemy. Listen. Apologize if you were wrong. Try to understand. Think first of someone else. Appreciate, be kind, and be gentle. Laugh a little more. Express your gratitude. Worship your God. Gladden the heart of a child. Take pleasure in the beauty and wonder of the earth. On this day, speak your love. Speak it again. Speak it still again. Speak it still once again.
invite you to join in singing Spirit of Life. It's in your gray or cloth-bound hymnals, number 123.
Good morning. I'm Liz Connors, a member of the lay pastoral care team here at First Parish in Bedford.
One definition of prayer that has always resonated with me is paying sacred attention. And so I invite you all into a moment to just pay attention for a while. And we can start with paying attention to ourselves, to how breath is feeling, to how settling into our pew or chair or bed, wherever we are, how that is feeling in our body. Where we might have tension or pain, what we might need, and just holding ourselves with some love and compassion. And then we might turn our attention to someone we love. Someone who is close to us, who might need some extra care right now. And we can just imagine holding that person in love, sending them care, whether they are near or far. And then we might extend that out to our wider community, whatever that means to you, whether that's your town, whether that's your congregation, whether that's your circle of acquaintances and friends, an organization you're part of. Holding that community, maybe specific individuals in the community or some issue the community is facing. And we just tend to that in our hearts. And moving out even farther, maybe into the state, into the country, into some group where you no longer feel intimate connection, but you know it is still somehow your people. And sending love, sending healing, sending care. And lastly, zooming all the way out to the whole world, because all the people are our people, all the beings are beings. And just holding with some sacred attention the whole world, with some love and care. Amen.
The work of this church and the work of each of your churches is so needed at this time. This church because we are out and liberal and proud of it. This church because there's no question that interfaith work and civil rights work and open arms and justice work belong here. This church because when you come here to be comforted, you are welcome. When you come here depleted, you are welcome. And when you come here exhausted, you are welcome. When you come here brimming with joy, you are welcome. When you come here spilling over with gifts to share, you are welcome. We are that magic pot into which we put what we have to give and from which we take what we most need. The gifts of this congregation will be most gratefully received.
thank you all for your generosity. And also, I forgot that not only do I need to make more orders of service in the summer, our offering goes to a shared organization agreed upon by the 5 congregations. And so, sorry to do a bait and switch, but the offering is actually going to Pink Haven, which is a coalition that provides access to mutual aid, relocation services, and gender-affirming care for trans and non-binary folks who are facing increasing levels of unsafe environments due to legislation around the country and just general hostility. And so this is a group that helps to organize people, helps to connect people with the resources they need, and helps folks escape states where they feel less safe and move to places that are safer. And so thank you for your generosity to that organization, and know that each Sunday of the Summer Consortium is a chance to give to them as well. So you have many more chances to do so. When I was a kid, I liked to do a lot of things fast. I talked very fast, so fast that my mother was amazed that when I became a minister, I could speak slowly enough to be understood. That had not been her experience. I liked to read really fast, and then I would tell my friends to hurry up and read fast so they could catch up with me because I wanted to talk about the book with them. I did my homework very fast, sometimes skipping a few pieces of key information along the way, forgetting to write my name on the paper. However, there was one part of life that I did not do fast, and that was running. I ran very slowly, and I hated running. And those of you who've already heard me preach about my cross-country experience know about this part. But for the rest of you, I'll share briefly. I used to dread the mile run in the presidential fitness testing that we had to do every year. I see some nods. Other people had to do that too. We didn't like that. But then I joined the cross-country team in 7th grade because my 3 best friends were joining it, and we were going to junior high, and I could not be left out. And I was so slow that at my first race, my mom thought I had gotten lost on the course. I had not. I was just really slow. But I did get better and better with practice, which often does happen. And that was hard and exciting and good. But one issue that persisted for me when I was really slow or when I was a little bit faster was that I would often go a little too fast at the start. Not right at the start usually, but sort of in the middle. And then by the end, I was so often really so tired, I just would slow down. And I would get passed by so many people on that last home stretch because they were like, it's the finish line, I'm gonna speed up. And I just didn't have it in me. Now that has remained true for me over time. As an adult, when I did my first half marathon, I started out and I was running along with an acquaintance and we were chatting, and I was so wrapped up in the conversation that it took me a while to realize that we were running much faster than I usually ran. And so I said, ooh, you better go ahead, I better slow down. But it was like a little too late. And by the time I finished that run, I was like barely upright and ended up getting very sick. Because as it turns out, your body thinks you must be fleeing for your life if you push it that hard, because why else would you be doing this? And so it starts to shut down non-essential systems like digestion. This issue with pacing has not only been true in running for me. Some of you may relate to this. I have often been just really optimistic about what can get done in a certain amount of time. And that optimism has repeatedly been proven to be false, but I still just am really ambitious about, yes, I can take that on, or that can get done by that time. Some people have suggested that this might be called ADHD. And by some people, I mean some of my closest loved ones, a few coworkers, and most recently a psychiatrist. So perhaps it is indeed true. But even the neurotypical among us, I believe, struggle sometimes with pacing. Life is just very often too much, and there's evidence for that everywhere. It feels like the pace is increasing. You can find easily people writing and talking about how kids are more and more overscheduled these days, about our decreasing attention spans as the pace of media speeds up, about burnout in the workplace where people are pushing through, about our cultural obsession with convenience and saving time. And that's not even to mention the onslaught of news and the extreme pace of horrific events that has been happening this calendar year. Now, there are also good resources about slowing down, often spiritual resources, spiritual practices. And in a chapter called Slow Life, from Sustainable Soul, Eco-Spiritual Reflections and Practices by Rebecca James Hecking, she writes, "Humanity evolved without clocks, schedules, or artificially imposed deadlines. We are biologically wired to respond to the daily and seasonal rhythms of light and dark. We are ill-equipped to handle the myriad incessant demands and pressures that pull on us from all sides. Considering all we are faced with, it's frankly a miracle that we cope as well as we do." And I agree with her. I think considering all that we are faced with, and some of us more than others, it's frankly a miracle that we are coping as well as we are. She offers some spiritual practices in each of her chapters, and she has some in this chapter like breathing the hours, which takes inspiration from a variety of religious traditions where prayer happens regularly throughout the day, such as Islam and Christian monastic traditions. She also talks about having a slow-down dinner, where you cook slowly without using any time-saving tools in the kitchen, and you eat slowly together. These spiritual practices about slowing down reminded me of a quote that I had stored in my brain, but too vaguely to remember exactly what it was or who said it. So I went looking, and I found this one. "Every Christian needs a half hour of prayer each day, except when he is busy. Then he needs an hour." It supposedly was said by St. Francis de Sales, but a further Google showed that it was probably not written by him at all, one of those famous quotes that was misattributed, which happens often. But I think the sentiment is a helpful one, and in fact, I learned there was a similar quote by Martin Luther that apparently really was by him about praying for 3 hours when his schedule was particularly full. Now, 3 hours seems a bit extreme, but Martin Luther was pretty extreme. He was reforming the entire church. I think these practices are about putting God first, if you're in the Christian realm, or about putting our connection with life first, if you're in the eco-spiritual realm. They can be about mindfulness, if you're in Buddhism. There's many ways to use spirituality to slow down. But in today's society, even slowing down has been turned into a way to speed up. It's called going slow to go fast. And there's lots of self-improvement style blogs about it. You can slow down and be even more productive. Of course, there are cases when, practically speaking, slower is faster. The old measure twice, cut once adage comes to mind. And this is part of why I'm very slow at cooking, because I usually read the recipe once, make a mistake, realize it, go back, read the recipe again, and try again, and that takes longer. But also, it's true, slow and steady only wins the race when your only opponent is a distracted rabbit. In reality, fast and steady wins the race. But as I recently learned, running my first marathon over a recent sabbatical, slow and steady can get you 490th place, which was the place I earned in the cheap marathon in Derry, New Hampshire. Somehow the phrase slow and steady prevents you from becoming violently ill after your race just isn't as catchy. Ultimately, if your body can run fast and stay steady and not be wrecked afterwards, that's awesome. You can win a race. And truly, in some areas of life, I can metaphorically pull off a faster pace for relatively short bursts of time and genuinely be okay. Going fast, of course, has its perks. Sometimes there is real urgency. Sometimes time really is of the essence and the stakes are high. Sometimes we don't really have a choice because a medical crisis or a family crisis has just been thrust upon us and we have to move quickly to deal with it. Going fast also has its very clear downsides. The burnout, the exhaustion, the making the mistakes, the rushing. And going slow has its positives, especially when it is done truly from a centered place and not just sneakily as a shortcut to actually secretly going fast. But it's also true that slow isn't always morally superior. I think sometimes just slowness for the sake of slowness can be held up as a spiritual goal, and that's not always helpful, especially when there is moral urgency, and especially if it's people with relatively more privilege telling other people that they should slow down with what they're demanding, organizing, etc. One adage that I like comes from Adrienne Marie Brown and is move at the speed of trust. And that one's nice because sometimes it does mean slow down, you need to build more trust. But sometimes it means there's a high level of trust, let's go fast. One example of that I've experienced was the formation of the Boston Immigration Justice Accompaniment Network during the first Trump administration, where a group of faith leaders and organizers sort of informally started this immigration accompaniment thing. And because there was a really high level of trust amongst the people who were working together, and we managed miraculously to build a pretty high level of trust with folks in immigration detention, we were able to expand very rapidly. I think also of the Luce Network and this Trump administration, the statewide immigration coalition, that because leaders of different organizations and groups had been working hard to build trust, when we hit the second Trump administration, there was an ability to quickly form a rapid response hotline and a coalition that is still sorting out a lot of how it operates, but has done a lot in a relatively short amount of time. We have to find our own pace, both as individuals and as groups. We have to find the pace that is sustainable. I was at a party yesterday and was chatting with someone who said that she was getting a new job, and as we kept chatting, I learned that she had been working in an immigration nonprofit in Lynn and was just feeling completely burnt out by working nonstop since January. I said, without really thinking about it, oh yeah, I did the workaholism burnout thing in Trump 1, and so now I'm doing it differently. And then I realized that was pretty good. And I thought, you know what? That's sort of true. I am doing it differently this time. Which is partially because I had a sabbatical at the beginning of the Trump administration, which I highly recommend to anyone who is able to have such a rest in their life. Definitely a huge privilege. But I think it's also partially because I did learn some things about pacing. In one of the many articles that are available on the topic of burnout, Candy Weens talks about the sweet spot of stress in the Harvard Business Review. Drawing on research about the window of tolerance developed by neurobiologist and clinical professor Dr. Dan Siegel, Weens writes, in this sweet spot between too revved up and not challenged enough, we have access to our executive functioning skills, which enable us to plan and organize, regulate our emotions, and manage our time and priorities. I resonate with this idea of the sweet spot, because I am a person who does need a certain amount of urgency and stimulation to do things. My sweet spot might be a bit faster than someone else, whose system needs a calmer, more organized pace, which is completely reasonable. And this all sounds very good. Don't go too slow, don't go too fast. It's like the Goldilocks take on life. But it's much easier said than done. One problem is, as Weens writes earlier in the article, because burnout is caused by prolonged exposure to stressful workplace conditions, fully eliminating it calls for systemic changes to organizational conditions and cultures. And I would just replace workplace with like the whole world and replace work conditions with life conditions. The systemic changes we need are so overwhelming, and working on them is part of why we are all so busy. Plus, it's just really hard to find the sweet spot sometimes. Capitalism and ableism don't want us to find our sweet spots. They're always going to push for more and more. It can be hard if you're neurodivergent and struggle with time and executive functioning in general. And it's also extremely hard if you have a physical disability like chronic illness. I've gotten to know more about this aspect up close because my best friend is chronically ill. And after getting COVID 3 times as a teacher, her chronic illness became much worse. And last summer, she began to struggle with even very basic functioning, feeling exhausted by things like climbing up one flight of stairs. It was scary and very disorienting. And while it was summer break from her teaching job, she wasn't sure what she would do in the fall. If she couldn't really climb a flight of stairs, how was she going to teach her high school classes all day? Well, over the summer, she got a crash course in dealing with this type of chronic illness, and near the end of the summer, her girlfriend and I went in on a device that she could wear that keeps track of pace points. It's basically a wearable heart rate monitor and an app. And it's designed for people with chronic illness to help them pace themselves because it's so freaking hard. They're called, literally, pace points. And so she could kind of learn what activities took more of her energy, what took less. And the app helped her track what were good days and bad days and figure out how to hit that sweet spot, because for her it's also a sweet spot where if she doesn't move enough, she gets worse. But if she moves too much, she gets worse. You have to do the right amount of exercise, but it's a different amount every day. You may be resonating with this if you also have a body that struggles, which many of us do. Now, my friend is lucky because her school has been very accommodating and helped her figure out ways to make her work possible for her. And also, she has gotten better since last summer. But there are many people whose workplaces are not accommodating, and there are many people whose physical limitations are more extreme, and where they are finding things to be inaccessible. And so that is why changing the systems and the circumstances remains so crucial. So I will say it again. It's not you. It's everything. It's the caring for aging parents and the bombs that are going off in other countries. It's the deportations, and it's the things our kids are dealing with at school. It's the medical diagnosis, and it's the images of people starving to death. It's all of it, and it's far too much. And it really isn't possible to do everything that we need to do and to also be well. And it also isn't okay that we are in these circumstances, whether they are unjust circumstances created by people with power or just life circumstances that suck, like getting sick. Nevertheless, we all live here on this planet with these problems in these finite bodies. And so, here are some of what I've learned about pacing from organizing and from marathon running that I think are somewhat relevant to life. The first is just to reiterate, find your own window. Find the pace that works for you. One thing that means is no comparisons. Comparison is not only the thief of joy, comparison creates envy and resentment. It is very unhelpful. Whether it's because we're comparing ourselves with someone who seems to be doing better and thinking, gosh, we should be like them, or whether we're comparing ourselves with someone who seems to maybe not be doing enough and feeling resentful, we don't know what's really going on for that person. I will say, at the beginning of the marathon I ran, the cheap marathon, I was going very slow because that's how I need to run. And a lot of people were passing me. And we were started, they do a unique start thing where they start you not all at the same time. They actually developed it during COVID, but then they were like, people like this. So it was like a staggered, highly staggered start. And so supposedly I was starting with only the people who were near my pace, but even they were all passing me. I was like, but I had learned my lessons. And I stayed the course. I did not speed up just because they were passing me. And I think that was so crucial. But it is so hard. My body wanted to speed up. Everyone else was going faster than me. And it's so easy to do that, both metaphorically and literally. But then we can use our tools. We can use things like spiritual practices that were referenced earlier. We can use apps. There are a lot of apps. Not all of them are useful, but sometimes they are useful. Maybe they track pace points. Maybe you have an app with a timer that goes off and reminds you to breathe or move or drink some water. One tool I've been using is trying to just write out like what I'm gonna do in a day, not like a list, but like literally like from 1 to 2, I will do this, because otherwise my unrealistic time brain will just be like, I'll do everything. Whatever tool works for you. For my race, I was using an app. I will say that it sort of almost felt like cheating, but it's not cheating. But the app called Runna would tell me to speed up or slow down, depending on how fast I was going. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. Or it'd say on pace. It'd be like, you're on pace. And so it was very helpful because that whole time that people were passing me and I wanted to speed up, it was like, you're on pace. And I was like, okay, all right, app. The other tip is rest, fuel, and companions. I guess those are 3 things. I don't know why I lumped them together. But anyway, rest, fuel, and companions. Rest is a fairly obvious one. We have to take breaks, even if they're really tiny breaks, because sometimes that's all we can get. And if you're interested in how to make tiny breaks work well for you, I really recommend Tricia Hersey, who runs the NAP ministry. She is she's all in on that topic, and it's all about how you can, whatever your life circumstances, you can figure out small ways to rest. Rest is really culturally discouraged, but it's so important. In terms of my life, one way I do rest is just by limiting how much I do things, especially stressful things. Like I only let myself read the news once a day, check Signal twice a day, and check my personal email once a day. It keeps things a little contained, and I recommend such practices if you don't already have them. For my marathon, I did what's called tapering, which you may be familiar with, which is where before the race, you start running less and less to let your body heal and be rested up. And that's another good strategy. If we know something big is coming up, rest beforehand, not just after when you're exhausted. It's harder, but it's a really good thing to do. Then there's fuel, like literally eating. It's something that's really important for our bodies in any kind of hardship. It's why people always bring the casseroles when someone dies or is sick. But it's also important to do nourishing things. For me, that's singing in groups. For you, it could be any number of things. Being in nature, being with your loved ones, being with your pets, reading some beautiful fiction. I also had to learn to fuel better while running. I had a friend who really pushed high-carb drink mix and those little goo packets, which are disgusting, but really helpful. I only recommend those if you're actually running a marathon or like a bicycle marathon or something, though. They're gross. And the last one, of course, is don't do it alone. We all know this, but again, easier said than done. Ask for help before you need it so badly. I've seen many people who have gotten to an absolute breaking point before they'll really reach out and take help. We can ask for help sooner than that. We can bring in more people to help with the tasks, which sometimes is hard if you think, but they're not going to do it the way I do it, which is true. When I took a little break from the immigration network over sabbatical, someone redid my instructions document, and first reaction was like, what the heck? And then I realized that she had literally just made a table of contents that was really useful. Bring in other people. I also had some marathon cheerleaders that were there to cheer me on. And I will say the cheer spot, there was one cheer spot, because this course you ran back and forth a few different times. And the cheer spot happened, the last point that it happened at was mile 23 of 26. And when I hit that spot, I had been thinking, gosh, maybe I am hitting that wall they talk about. I was slowing down. But then I saw my housemate and my friend. They were there with their toddler and their baby, and they started running alongside me because most of the spectators had cleared out by then because, I'm slow. And so there they were running, each one on each side of me with the baby and the toddler, and it filled me with so much motivation that I sped up, and those last 3 miles were the fastest of my whole race. And in fact, I ended my marathon a minute ahead of what the fancy app that was tracking me, everything's apps, what predicted. And so my friends didn't catch my ending on video as they'd planned because I came too soon. I was so proud of myself because it was unlike any other race I had ever run. I sped up at the end. That story has a happy ending, but life is not one concrete race. And I can't tie this sermon up with a neat little bow. We are all trying to survive in inhumane circumstances that are only getting worse. We are not going to win the race if winning means curing every disease, restoring every broken relationship, stopping every deportation, preventing all the fossil fuels from being used, making sure no bomb or gun ever goes off again. But I am not running this race to win in my lifetime. I am running this race because the alternative is to lose my soul and give in to despair. And so many people are running it with me, and walking and rolling and scootering and resting. So let's pace ourselves and support one another so that we leave no one behind as we move collectively towards more justice and more connection and more love. Our closing hymn is Guide My Feet. It is in your gray hymnal. It's number 348. Our closing words are from abolitionist organizer Miriam Kaba. I'm on a 500-year clock right now. I'm right here knowing that we've got a hell of a long time before we're going to see the end. Right now, all we're doing is building the conditions that will allow this thing to happen.